I'm Rayesa Gheewala.
And we're here to share with you how to live life without oppression, really, isn't it? So, Rayesa
Yeah.
was the brains behind this initiative, and there's a curtain that keeps going in front of my camera. So, Rayesa, would you share with us what you were thinking when you approached me about us doing these lives?
Yeah. I kept seeing over and over again in the in the atmosphere and the climate and in working with the people that I work with, how very innocently we we don't realize, but we can oppress our own self. And it's so unnecessary. And what do I mean by that? Meaning, like, we can get stuck in thoughts or thinking where we feel like a victim, where we feel defeated or frustrated. And then we can start falling into despair or losing hope. And we know from our faith that there is always hope. And, our faith and Allah always offers hope. So I was just kind of just thinking that, you know, what we have come to learn, what we have come to understand, what you're sharing and teaching at Back to the Fitrah Academy is really about helping people to see their own power, if you will, their own autonomy and agency that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given all of us. So it doesn't matter what circumstance or situation that you're in, who are the people in your life that maybe are making you feel like going crazy, because Allah knows exactly what He's sending you, where He's putting you. So it's not about those external things, but it's really about your perception, how you're thinking, how you're looking at everything that's happening in your life, and how you're relating to it. So I really felt like, we can do such a great service to people by expanding on and sharing this information, this knowledge that we have, that we're not victims no matter what is happening in our life. And we have the gift, this God given gift of thought, and to be able to utilize it in a way that is going to be helpful and beneficial for us in this life and the next.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons we're both so passionate about this message is that I think once upon a time we both felt like we were oppressed in
Absolutely.
our lives. And certainly were people behaving in a way that's not acceptable. But we've come to realize that we played a role in being oppressed in those situations by the way we were looking at it, as opposed to these days. In fact, I don't even think people try to oppress because they can just sense that it won't work.
Yeah. When when you're thinking that you're a victim or that someone is doing something to you and that's why you feel that way, you signal or send off this energy, because like emotions are, thoughts and energy, right? So you send off this energy, like, that you're easy to manipulate or you're easy to take advantage of. And we just don't operate that way anymore, or we just don't vibe that way anymore. So like we attract a different type of people around us in our environment, which is very true.
Mm. Yeah. So the experience we have of life now is quite different, isn't it? Do you want to
Yeah.
describe how it looks different for you, and maybe then I can describe how it looks different for me?
Yeah, it's a great perspective. So I was thinking about that the other day, how difficult people or we hear these words, and I really want to share the typical common words that we hear out in mainstream, like toxic people in our
Mm.
life, right? That frustrate us, that annoy us, or that make us angry and upset. That doesn't, I don't, like, I don't feel that way anymore because I don't take things personally. But before I was taking things personally, I was easily offendable. And once you get offended, those boxing gloves come out, and you respond from a defensive, defeated space and energy, rather than very calm, calm and clear, and having conviction, and being able to be connected to yourself and Allah in the present moment. So a lot of things don't bother me anymore. And sometimes people think that, like, I just don't care. I'm really complacent because I don't feel like it's necessary to do something about every little thing that's happening around me. Some things just take care of its place, take care of itself on its own, because I'm able to operate from a place of wisdom, from a place of clarity, and really from a place of tawakkul. Like, I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of everything, and I know where I'm supposed to focus on. And that's the difference now, is that I focus on what is Allah looking for me to do in this moment. And how do I know that? Rather than, oh my God, this is happening. Oh my God, that's happening. I got to do something about this. And then I got to do this. And it's like running around frantic and stressed out and overwhelmed. So, it's the way I respond. Things are still crazy and chaotic. Look at the world that we live in today. It's gotten worse, but the way I respond has shifted and changed. And especially, when living from that natural state. And I say natural state because our fitrah state is to have tawakkul in Allah, right? So living from that state of tawakkul has really allowed me to focus on what Allah is showing me that I need to, that's my part, and leaving the rest to Him.
SubhanAllah. We've got someone from Facebook. Unfortunately, just to let you know, it just comes through as Facebook user, so I apologize for not addressing you by name. But wa alaikum salam. The question is, it does take a lot of work to move from that place of victimhood, I suppose. How did the change come about for you? And then there's another question. Do you think, Phil, having at least one place of peace, ideally our homes? So, of course, ideally, we want a peaceful environment, right? And what I have witnessed is that when we internally come to peace, that the environment around us seems to follow, that there's something about us becoming grounded first that helps the rest around us ground.
Yeah, it's like once the home within is at peace, then everything else can follow suit, right? Because this is the real home. This body is the home for our soul. And feeling that, being at peace in our heart, will allow us to operate from a space of peace. So it doesn't work from the outside in, it works from the inside out.
Yeah, which really follows from the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He doesn't change the condition of a people till they change the condition within themselves. And so this is actually really what the unoppressed theme is all about, isn't it? That when we change that condition within ourselves, then the outside actually starts to fall into place. So we don't have to worry about the outside, and taking that off our mind gives us the opportunity to feel at peace on the inside. So when you get back to the question of ideally you'd like your home to be a place of peace, oh, absolutely. No saying about that. What if there are people who live in that place that aren't peaceful? Well, what we're discovering is, and it doesn't necessarily happen immediately, but that when we find a peace, somehow it can influence the other people for them to actually become on track too. And I think it's something to do, you know how you're talking about the boxing gloves? It's to do with the fact that even if others put their boxing gloves on, we don't have to. And so there's less
You
of that.
neutralize the energy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, there's a plane going overhead. I'm not sure if it's loud for you guys, but it's out here.
Yeah. No,
And
it's
in terms of it takes a lot of work to get out of victimhood. We don't use language like work because we don't see it like work. It's actually just a switch or a shift in perspective and thinking and so in fact what is it can be one thought away that you go from victimhood into being empowered to take charge of your situation, whatever it is.
Yeah. What you were saying about how when you have those shifts, you give off a different energy, and that hadith that says that a believer is a mirror to another believer. So the people around you are going to mirror your own energy, and the way you manage your home, it starts from how your inner state, your internal state. So this question about a lot of work, there's this misunderstanding that you have to do something in order to get to peace. And I love this topic because this is what we teach back to the Fitrah Academy, that you're born into a state of peace. That is your Fitrah state. So you don't have to do anything to get back there. You already have that within you. You just got disconnected from it. And so once you have that reconnection or that shift or that it clicks back in, then it just happens effortlessly. It's not like you have to do something, because Allah SWT already created us that way. It's just that there have been distractions and nurturing from our environment, not our nature, but our nurturing from our environment that have just taken us away from that.
So the comment here is, it may be difficult to get out of fight and flight mode once someone is caught there. And I'll tackle that in a second. And following on, it starts with therapy and helping us find our voice and faith in God. So
especially when there's a lot of trauma, correct? This is great.
Yeah, so this is where it's going to segue beautifully into our topic, which we hadn't even got to, which was, is it trauma or a love letter from Allah? So maybe if I share a little bit of my story, it might help see how it isn't difficult to get out of the fight and flight mode, that it really is just a thought away. So when you do my timeline, there was always oppression. So there is oppression, right? But whether we feel oppressed is whether we suffer that oppression is the choice. But as a kid, of course, you don't really have that choice because you're little, you're still growing up, your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. And so a lot of these experiences are giving you your perception of life and how life works. And so as a result of being the different forms of abuse that I went through as a kid, I actually accepted way too much abuse as an adult and ended up in an abusive marriage. And so even now, my adrenals are still struggling physically from all the decades of being in that fight or flight mode. So yes, physiologically, my body's still trying to figure things out. It's still got some chemical reactions going on that aren't helpful, that have come from so many years of being in that state. But emotionally and spiritually, I'm not in that state at all. And it just took one insight that I had for me to switch out of that mode and to no longer be victim. Because it's, if you get out of that mode, you cease to be a victim of your circumstances and then empowered to actually travel through the tests and challenges that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us in this life. So alhamdulillah, I don't see it as being a difficult process if you've got the right guidance and the right message being shown to you, which is coming from a spiritual perspective where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a part of the solution, that it's all about Allah and your connection with Allah. And if you come from that perspective, it can be really just a switch.
Because that's where healing comes from. It comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it comes from your connection back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a lot of what you describe is what we hear in one of these buzzwords of childhood trauma and how it affects you. And everybody goes through things in their childhood, right? I mean, at different levels, at different varying levels. And I some of the things that I see is that in mainstream, like we're looking for someone to blame, whether it's generational trauma or, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying that it's almost like we need to point the finger to people from the past or our parents, or we're looking for an explanation for our behavior rather than understanding, rather than understanding what's going on internally. Like it's an internal thing, it's not an external thing, and where to look instead of looking outside of ourselves, which is what I feel mainstream does, and going back inside of yourself. Okay, well, you mentioned, is it trauma or is it a love letter from Allah? And a lot of these intense emotions that we feel, even anxiety and depression, it just means that we're off track or off balance and we need to reconnect. And having that understanding shows you where to look. Because it's when we point a finger and we say, okay, it's because of this, it's because of that, it doesn't allow us to move forward. Okay, so now what do we do? Oh, how does that help us in moving forward? And yes, it's not it is a journey. It's not like I think it's important to mention that with this understanding of who we really are, we don't view ourselves as broken. And that Allah didn't create us that way, where there's a lot of language around that too, in terms of like, I'm broken or I feel broken. And, and then that leads to this thinking of, well, something's wrong with me. And there's something defective in me. I need to be fixed. And that's very problematic because it defeats the person, and it makes them feel like they're defective. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't create a defective human being. And when we understand that, I think it really allows us to reconnect back to ourselves and Allah in the present moment, where we can look deeper into, okay, well, what is Allah trying to show me? What is Allah trying to teach me? It may be coming through a person who is causing oppressive behavior or is behaving oppressively, maybe coming to that person, but there's a message there for you to see, to learn, to grow. And that perspective shift that you have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to show you what needs to change within you so He can change your external circumstances, your situation, people's hearts, and that's, I think, is shifting the how do we heal, the how of when somebody said here, how to get out of fight and flight mode. Yeah, that was what was coming to me.
So we've got a number of things said here. So how can you get out of that, like you were just talking about, state, or help loved ones? With the loved ones, it has to start with us first. We can't, it's a bit like, you need to, if someone is drowning, you need to be on the platform pulling them in. You can't be in the water drowning with them to help them out. So we have to always focus on ourselves first. And I think that's been one of the challenging parts of my journey, is seeing my kids needing me to be in a better place. So I could help them and not being them until I got there first, and then not being judgmental happening, or I could have prevented that, or I could have done better. With that, but I wasn't able to because I wasn't there.
I think
everything that has happened.
Kathryn, your connection is not very clear.
Yeah, is it better now?
Because you broke up for a while.
Is it okay now?
I could hear you, but your image is a little distorted. Yeah, you were cutting off.
Yeah, hopefully it will come back. Let's see. Is that better?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay. Yeah, I think what happens is when my phone goes back on screensaver, it stops the internet properly or something. So I've just got to keep an eye on it and make sure it's staying hotspotting. So what I was saying was that about you've got to, it's yourself first before helping others. And
Allah tells us that in the Quran, right?
Sorry, I'm just waving to the people that are leaving. Bye. Assalamu alaikum. The tribe was here. Subhanallah. So what was coming to me has just gone. Sorry.
No, that's okay. You were saying
walking past
you were saying that you really have to take care of yourself first. You have to be in that grounded space. And I was saying that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, to save ourselves first and then our family members. Because if we're drowning and we're trying to help them, we feel like, and then they jump on board and we're both drowning. That's not.
Yes. And then what was coming to me was that the key in my journey has always been to turn to Allah first and make dua. That all the way, that's what I was going to say, that all the way through this journey, I made dua, and then exactly the right person I needed to support me would just appear before me. And that's how I got here, is just trusting that, not panicking, not desperately searching, but just going, okay, Allah, I can see that I need this, this, and then the right person would come along. And that's how I got here, and then able to help others.
And that's my story as well. I mean, you were one of the people that I said I need help. I needed help with parenting at the time. I needed help with co-parenting. I needed and then that's how it evolved. Because I was in that space of, I talk about this a lot in terms of codependency, and I describe it as codependency like shirk. And I was always relying on everything and everyone else besides Allah, where Allah was not even in the picture, or maybe he was superficially, but not with that real reliance. And it was only when, there was no other option for me and I had to turn back in a way where that was it. I had to rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exclusively. And I realized, wait a minute, this is how it works. I just need to go to the source. I need to go back to the source every time. Go back to the source, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he sends the people that I need when I need it. I was talking to somebody today, and it's like, sometimes we think we need to figure things out and we need to know things. And we try to think and overthink and figure it out, and we get stuck because we're on a need to know basis. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send us what we need to know when we need to know it. And we have to trust that.
And that's where the tawakkul comes in, and then that is the solution to everything that we're talking about. Because when you have the tawakkul, Allah is sufficient for us, because Allah has said in Surah At-Talaq that anyone who is conscious or mindful of Allah, that he will find a way out for them from every difficulty, and that he will provide for them from sources they couldn't even imagine. So we don't need to know. We could never imagine. And then whoever puts their trust in Allah, which is the next step, then Allah is sufficient for them. And that's the answer to the whole thing. Every single difficulty that we are in, that is the answer. And if we are seeing our difficulty as traumatic, then we are missing the point of that verse. We've lost in that moment our tawakkul. Not saying that no, people don't have tawakkul, just saying that in that moment we've lost sight of the tawakkul. We've lost sight of trusting that Allah is going to find a way out for us of this, and that everything is happening according to his plan, and that nothing of his plan is going to be more than we can bear.
Yeah, and it's just that we got disconnected in that moment, and
Mm.
it's really an invitation or a love letter that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending us to come back, and there's something He's trying to show us from within, not from outside.
Mm.
And I think that, the other part of this equation, when we understand where to look for our solutions internally, hearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom, our level of consciousness also rises. And one of the things that you mentioned in that verse is whoever's mindful or conscious. Most of us are running around in this life, in this world, on autopilot. We don't even know what we're doing, why we're doing it. We don't know the intentions behind what we're doing. And we're just, doing what we've been trained or programmed to do. So having that level of consciousness, higher level of consciousness, will allow you to think differently too, will allow you to see things differently. And so that's part of the equation as well. When, it's not just, yes, it is about thought, but there's other pieces to the puzzle as well. Like, being connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hearing his wisdom. And if we're in our head and all of the thinking, that the chatter is getting in the way, we won't be able to hear how he's guiding us. It will be in confusion. And I found that was very true for me as well. I was in confusion states for much of my life. And I had a lot of these, we hear, thinking patterns that I had picked up along the way that were actually hurting me. They were beliefs and thinking patterns I had about myself that weren't true, that I was believing to be true. And we hear them called like limiting beliefs, or we hear them called like negative self-thinking. And those are things that actually hurt us. And we think that other people are oppressing us, but it's how we're relating to what's actually happening.
Yeah. We've got a comment here. How often, great insights. How often do we go live? Inshallah, we'll be going live in the first week of each month. So Tuesday for the USA, and Wednesday Australia time in the first week of each month, inshallah, with a different topic. So where does the love letter from Allah fit into it? Because we've sort of covered the fact that the trauma fits into it when we are disconnected from Allah and we are caught up in understanding what's happening to us from a very dunya perspective, rather than from the perspective of, this is the qadr of Allah, it is a test from Allah, it will never be more than we can bear. And so if we can have trust in Allah, Allah will be sufficient for us and he will find a way out for us. So what is the love letter? The love letter from Allah is really that if we are experiencing, anxiety, stress, debilitating grief, depression, these very overwhelming feelings around what's happening, is the love letter is, hey, you've forgotten about me from Allah, right? That's all it's telling us. It's just telling us, if we got into that level of pain emotionally, that somewhere along the line we are looking at it through the wrong lens. And that if we can look at it through the lens of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not burdening us with more than we can bear, and that this life is just a test and trial, and really detach from the dunya, then we won't suffer the experience. We will still be challenged and tested and stretched and find it difficult and have feelings, but the feelings won't get to that point where they take over the driver's seat. We'll still be in a state of wisdom in how we are responding to the situation. And some examples of that, I had a pretty challenging September this year. My dad suddenly died, and then 2 weeks later I broke my arm and was in hospital for 3 days having major surgery so they could put a Meccano set in my arm to put it back together. And I had many people saying to me, oh, that must have been very traumatic. And it's like, I wasn't experiencing it as traumatic. I was experiencing it like, well, what I took away from breaking my arm was, yeah, you've been getting the message to slow down for a while now and you haven't been listening. That was the love letter, was like, you haven't been listening to slowing down. It's time to slow down. And so because I didn't listen, I got slowed down, very, very slowed.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Those notices, they come, but in our busyness, in our, in our hurriedness, we don't want to see them because we don't have time for them.
Yes,
you know
I haven't got time to listen.
Oh, I gotta do my own thing. I'm doing.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's what you were saying goes along the lines of what somebody mentioned here as well, about acceptance. They said something here. Where's the comment?
Yeah, that was under yeah.
Yeah, something about does being in a place of peace spiritually means acceptance? And yeah, because from that place of peace, we are more aligned and inclined to accept the qadr of Allah. Like what we are thinking, wanting, and our plan starts to come in alignment with accepting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan. Otherwise, we're going to be in that resistance, that fighting, and that frustration and upset. Like we'll have a lot of resistance to acceptance. So that's very true. It's very true
And
when we have this.
acceptance of the qadr of Allah is not accepting people's bad behavior, by the way, because some people can get confused with that acceptance means, well, then I have to accept the fact that this person is behaving badly towards me. No, it doesn't. We accept that this is the situation and this is the qadr of Allah, but we set a strong limit and go, it's certainly not okay to behave like that. And because of the acceptance of the qadr of Allah and not taking it personally, we actually can very powerfully set those limits on people that are not behaving well towards us.
Yeah, and usually it's just a test. Allah knows exactly what situations He's put you with and with whom for a reason. And if there's situations that are not acceptable or okay, it's there because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to show you, okay, like everything's coming up for you. We hear this word a lot that you get triggered, right? And well, what does that mean? What is Allah trying to show you? What is He trying to invite you to? Is this right or is this wrong? Is this okay? How do you perceive it? How do you deal with it? And one of the things you mentioned was not taking things personally, because it's when we relate everything that's happening outside of us in our world to mean something about us, or we relate it back to us, is where we get stuck. And then we feel, then that brings us down. And that's just not the case.
And there's a lot of thinking around that you have to be out of the situation in order to get to the point where you don't take it personally. But what we've been experiencing over the years is that certainly you can probably get there quicker if you're out of the situation, because you've got more time to reflect and less time being in it. However, it is also still possible within the situation to move forward to a point where you stop taking it personally and be able to act with wisdom or respond with wisdom in various situations. And I think that's all of this is an incredibly hopeful message to anybody who's feeling like life, they're just oppressed in one way or another, that they're just a victim of their circumstances or the people around them, that there is hope out of that. And yeah, I came out of a very abusive marriage that was quite terrible, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened the way out for me very safely and very easily because I relied upon him. There was a lot of mess for years afterwards, but that sliding out of there happened with such ease. Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitated the way out beautifully because I just relied upon him to provide the way out.
Yeah, I think if we all reflect and look in our life, the times that we trusted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and relied on him, how things worked out, and the times that we didn't, and we all know when we didn't, we just went according to what we thought was right and what we wanted, how we wanted things to go. It got really messy. And, I've been tested in many different ways with my children, and I found that like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was testing me, but also showing me, because my particular test was around codependency, and I had really created dependencies on people to help me feel okay, to help me feel good about myself. I was relating my worth to people, and even as a mother, feeling like I had to have my children with me. I had to know everything that was going on with them. And that thinking wasn't true. Like I felt that I had to or I needed to. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was showing me that no, like he's in control. He's taking care of the kids. And I'm just, have been given their title of their mother. But that doesn't mean that I manage and I control, and I need to set the path forward for them in my life as well. And that process of detachment and unlearning and dropping all of those thinking patterns that were causing me to feel like, their dad is doing this to me, and all of these thoughts that made me feel like I was powerless, I was helpless, and I was stuck. To then seeing like, okay, well, this is a test from Allah. How is he looking for me to respond? What is he looking for me to do? What's the right thing that is going to please him, while also being in alignment with what's right for me and my family? Like getting in alignment with that, because I think one of the things that I find people struggle with is that, okay, well, I feel this is right for me, but should I be doing this because will Allah be happy with it? And with this understanding, we can see how that very much can be in alignment and how you can move forward. Not even move forward, but flow forward. Because when you're trying to move forward, there's resistance. I'm talking about flowing forward, progressing in your life and reaching your potential. Really, it's very, very possible.
Alhamdulillah. Well, we were only going to talk for half an hour, but of course we're not capable of that, Rayesa.
No, I think we've covered a lot, and we've had some great input here, and appreciate everyone contributing your thoughts and ideas.
I love the engagement that we've got, and it's been from across all the platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, and I think there was someone from maybe YouTube there as well. But it's just brilliant to have everybody engaging with us in this discussion. And we would love for you to share your takeaways, even if you're listening to the recording of this. Share what you took away from the conversation. Really, I think what we hope to bring to the table with these discussions, which will be once a month, inshallah, is hope. That we see way too many people in such a state of loss and suffering, and we know that it's possible for them to come out of that, and we would like to be, part of that solution by sharing what we now see and understand ourselves from our journey. Alhamdulillah. Wa alaikum assalam.
Shahira. Yeah, from Canada. It's amazing having this type of connection. You're in Australia. I'm in the United States. We have people from everywhere around the world. Just really connecting and offering hope.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. So
Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khair for being with us for our very first episode. And we look forward to seeing you in a month's time, in the first week of January, inshallah. And we will continue the conversation of unoppressed, helping people get out of the thinking that's holding them back so that they can live a beautiful life. We actually had some better wording than that. Let me see if I can find it. Unoppressed, unlock the freedom to be, challenging the thinking that is keeping us trapped in an illusion of oppression. That's the wording. We should memorize that before next time.
And there you go. Yeah, because looking through that lens, it's not hopeless. It's not the end. You're not defeated because you have Allah with you, and you know you have Allah with you.
Yep. And that is the solution. That is the healing. That is the healing.
Yeah. Yeah. Is when you know that. Because we lose sight of that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. Well, Jazakallah khair, Rayesa. Jazakallah khair, everyone, for being here.
My pleasure. I'm so glad that we did this. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.